Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns and welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Big thank you to everybody out there who's liked my stuff on LinkedIn, connected up with me, shared the content, and told a friend about the brutal truth. Today we got an episode, we're going to be talking about the presentation. How, when we're in front of the customer, whether it be via screen sharing or even on the phone or even more important, that presentation, how should we show up? What tricks and techniques and things can we do to stand out, to really connect with the audience? So I have Julie Hansen back on the show today. She was on probably a year or two ago. This is her thing. This is all she does. She was an actor, I guess is an actress, and has now applied it to selling. So we're going to get into all the topics around there to really bring your game up another level. And make this, part of it, because we are performers. And Julie brought that up before we started turning on the mic, and that in sales, every day is a performance, whether we like it or not. And how we show up is critical. So before we get into it, I want to make sure you're checking out Co-Video, talking about showing up. You can type. Yeah, sure. You can put some words in an email and all that. How about if you did a video email? It is what's connecting today in 2018, and it's going to be even bigger in 2019. So make sure you're checking it out. At minimum, follow their company page on LinkedIn so you can get the updates on what they're up to. They just had a new Chrome plugin that makes it super simple to do it right from wherever you are, to quickly put together a video email. It's so much more sincere, so much more human than typing in and using mail merge. Oh, God, enough with it. Also, you're checking out Discover.org. Discover.org is a secret weapon for anybody who really wants to understand their marketplace, their total addressable market, who is in market and wants to talk to you. Check it out. They've got a lot of great videos, a lot of great blogs at discoverorg.com. Let's get into it with Julie. I'll sum it up at the end, and I'll give you an update on the courses. They're cooking. I'm now doing one-on-ones with people to help them through particular deals, situations, and really just crush their number. And if you listen to the very end, you'll get a little testimonial of one student who's just blowing it out. Hey, Julie, welcome back to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little update on yourself.
Well, it's great to be back, Brian. I am doing a lot of presentation skills development workshops around the country, and also demo skills as well through my company, Performance Sales and Training. I've been toying with the idea of writing a new book, but I haven't. I still, Sales Presentations for Dummies is my last book, and just going out and seeing all kinds of presentations. I've got some new thoughts on updates for that, certainly. Just doing workshops and speaking and coaching. So keeping busy like yourself.
And has the kind of view on presentations and demos changed much since we last talked? Are people looking for shorter, more direct, or more authentic, or storytelling?
Well, all of the above. Yeah. You kind of nailed it. Yes, and I address all that in my book, but what I found is it's really kind of this slow-moving process for people to change their presentations. I find that it's really one of the last areas that people start to update their process. We've all changed the way that we prospect, the way that we follow up with leads, some of the conversation styles. But presentations, people still tend to fall into these old structures or habits that we've been doing since the 70s.
Yeah.
And it's not working. So yes, they need to be shorter. They need to be broken into chunks that people can consume and remember and retain. That's a big problem today. And we need to be more engaging because people are seeing so many presentations and not just as customers, but as in their personal life, as online. They're just getting all kinds of things thrown at them. So how do we stand out and differentiate ourselves?
And are you still seeing marketing own the presentation, or is it kind of transition to sales, or is it still somewhere in the middle?
You mean as far as marketing, sounding more like a marketing message than a...
No. As far as like the production of like the slides themselves, the actual physical.
Oh, as far as marketing. Yes and no. I think it depends on the company. A lot of big companies they spend a lot of money on these sales presentations, and then and the salespeople, and I'm sure you've been there and I've been there. Like, oh, thanks, that's nice. I'll be doing my own thing, right? So there's still a bit of a disconnect because marketing doesn't always understand how it's being perceived by the customer and what's really happening out in the field. And what's really happening is people don't want to sit through 50 slides.
Yeah, those days are well gone, aren't they?
Well, yeah, goodbye already. And they don't want to. They don't need to have that company overview right at the beginning that just instantly puts them to sleep. If you're giving a presentation and somebody does not know about your company at that point, you should not be giving a presentation.
Yeah, they don't want to see the building.
Right, yeah. Oh, and how many employees do you have?
Yeah. And where'd the founder go to school?
Right. And it's interesting. I always tell people, look at that like you would any other content that you're delivering to a customer, and go, what's a feature and what's a benefit here? Because most of those things are features. If you can turn that into it's a benefit, we have 500 offices around the world, and because of that, you're going to always be able to have somebody to support you. Great, but if it's just a feature and it's of no benefit to the customer, why are you saying it?
And when you get engaged with a client after you've kind of gotten the paperwork done, you're on site, how much time do you spend with the actual content versus the delivery?
That's a really interesting question. I was thinking about that this week because I often get engaged to work with people on, come in, our presentation skills are lacking, and then I get in and I find the material that they're working with, and it's like, the best actor in the world couldn't bring this stuff to life. So it's usually a combination of both, and oftentimes maybe it's not the content, but it's the structure of it. It's like, okay, this is good stuff, but you can't take 20 minutes to get to your main point anymore. I'm a big proponent of doing the last thing first. What is the most important thing, putting it right up front, and then you can go into more detail as they're interested, because that's how we take in information today as consumers.
And I think people really leave with maybe 3 things, most likely one thing that sticks in their mind.
Exactly. Yeah. It's frightening what
how
people
little
are
we
really going to take away. And we spend so much time like, I'm going to tell them this, I'm going to show them that. What I would say is approach your presentation or your demo or your conversation and thinking, what is the one thing I want them to remember? Now, hopefully they'll remember more than one thing, but if you had to boil it down to one thing, you got to decide what that is, and then make sure that you are reinforcing that as strategic points throughout your conversation or presentation, because otherwise you're really leaving that to chance. If you try and, just kind of throw a plate of spaghetti at them and hope they, make something out of it, you really are putting it in the customer's hands.
Because the people who generate the content, the slides, the story, know it so well. They're so deep in it. They have their own language, their own visuals of how they think about it. And I always like to get it without having to talk to anybody. Can I make any sense out of this? Because you usually see, a bunch of acronyms.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yes.
It's one after another and several in the same line, and people don't understand that if you go into someone else's company, either online or on site, they don't know that stuff.
Right. And it's not your job to teach them your language.
Right.
I mean, that's a whole nother session. Like, it's not a training session. Like, and this means that. And it's like, okay, you've just wasted, you've taken up this part of their memory bank on this really unimportant point of what you call this particular feature.
And also, people talk about like the power of their product, and people still don't get what it does.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of like vagueness around it. Well, there's a lot of those buzzwords that make that. If I hear someone say it's like a single pane of glass, one more time, I swear, I'm gonna just walk out of the room. It's like everybody says these same buzzwords. They really have no meaning anymore. It doesn't differentiate you. It doesn't tell me. It kind of gives me an idea, but you got to be more precise than that, and you have to find a succinct way to clarify what you're trying to say, and not rely on these buzzwords and acronyms and sayings that everybody else is throwing around.
And how do you balance what does it do and what is the outcome? Because I had a conference call with somebody who wanted to work with me, and they focused 100% on the outcome. And I at the end of it, I still didn't know what they did. Like, how do you get that outcome? Why should I believe it? Or where would it apply?
Right. Well, and it's interesting that, I believe that starting with the outcome is a very powerful place to start. Yeah. But that shouldn't be the bulk of your conversation or presentation. The outcome should be, based on our conversation that we had, Mr. Customer, and your objectives and goals and challenges and the things you were looking for. This is the kind of thing that, will address those needs. Here's, what it does. Would you like to dive in deeper? Would you like to see how this works? Right? And then you start going into more detail and you let them drive that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
And how many of your clients are looking, are there many that are just 100% online or?
Yes, quite
really?
a few.
Okay.
Yeah. More and more. So, and that adds that whole, other layer of difficulty, which is connecting with your audience and keeping them engaged. So it's even more important that you use good structure and you present what they're interested in right away, and you don't do all this corporate overview stuff, and you cut to the chase and you engage them. You break it into chunks so that you're constantly keeping them engaged. Otherwise, it's just deadly.
Because I think once you get in front of somebody physically, you have like the standard hour, which is really, 10 to 15 minutes. So, right.
Yeah.
And then 10 to 15 at the end, hopefully closing for a next step.
Mm-hmm.
So you got like a half an hour. Online, how much time do you really think you have of their real attention?
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of studies on attention, and a couple of studies agree that average focused attention is about 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And that's, really being able to pay 100% attention, not get distracted. Our attention is going to ebb and flow. That's just how we are. But unfortunately, what happens in sitting in front of a screen, we're all a little bit programmed to kind of sit back and, like we're
read your email.
To multitask, and there's too many distractions. So I think you have to, every 2 to 5 minutes, 5 minutes at the longest stretch, you have to do some kind of engagement, or you have to change the topic, or you have to put up an interesting picture, or you have to do a poll. You got to really you got to think about that structure and pepper in these opportunities to regain their attention, because, you're just going to lose it. And I think 20 minutes for online is, in most cases, a good goal. Yeah. Because after that, there's just this bell curve of tension where you just start to go, just fall off drastically. After 10 minutes, if you haven't done anything to re-engage your audience, they're just barely hanging in there.
That's it. And I think online, setting an hour meeting may be counterproductive. Do you think? Or
it's you never know if you've really structured your presentation, your demo well, and it's the solution, they're really interested in it, and you've got people that want to do deeper dive. They may want to spend that time going deeper, but I would structure it so that you're doing the higher level, really interesting stuff up front. Yeah. And then, so the decision makers can go, okay, I see where this is going. I like it. I believe you can do it. I don't need to pay full attention to this, or I can leave the call. And you guys in IT or whatever who are going to use this, or HR, you guys stay on and ask the deeper questions, because I don't need to know how you're going to set that up for, our system. I don't need to know. I saw that I can get this report that tells me in a snapshot everything I need to know on a high level. So I'm good.
And how do you help people become better presenters?
Oh my, that's a big question.
How do you effectively?
How do I personally, or like in general, how does one become a better presenter?
I think everybody listening wants to become a great presenter, because we've seen those people, and typically there's the one person at a company that's the rock star that that can come in, they're charming, they know the
jobs of your company. Sure, yeah. It's what I find is it's just everybody's unique. And if you're trying to be like somebody else, if you've got your eyes set on being Steve Jobs, and I've seen a lot of people try to be Steve Jobs, it's not going to be effective, because it's not going to be authentic. It's not you. So it's really, for most people, being a great presenter means being yourself, but being an elevated version of yourself, right? Most great presentations are not delivered from our comfort zone. And I think what I see happening is, which I think is good in some points, some aspect, this tide of people going from this very, very sort of inauthentic presentation style to a more, more personable. And that's great. But you know what? I don't want to see the you that's propped up on your, have your feet propped up on your table surfing through Netflix, right?
Yeah.
I want to see you that's at your best and really, has put something into this meeting and shown up with good energy and commitment to finding a solution for us. And not so laid back that I'm not sure you really want to be here.
And you, as the sales rep, you're the leader of that presentation. So, you have to lead with the energy, you have to lead with the direction, lead with the communications.
Right. And, the customer's taking their cue from you. The second you walk in the door, all those nonverbal signals that we don't pay a lot of attention to really communicate very loudly to the room. Are you happy to be here? Are you excited? Are you bringing good energy? Are you confident? Are you credible? So all those things start really early in a presentation. So I think starting to be a good presenter, it all starts before you get in the presentation. It's just, I use a lot of acting techniques and processes in my training, because there's so many correlations between acting and it's part performance.
It is a performance, isn't it?
Yeah, I say that because people are like, oh, I'm not a performer. Well, anytime you are up in front of an audience, whether it's,
like it or not,
it's a performance is taking place. So you can acknowledge it and access some tools that performers have used for hundreds of years that they know how to get in optimum state, or you can ignore it and try and figure it out yourself. That's kind of, and some people just naturally do that, but I think that's very rare. Even great actors, like, nobody knows how to talk to a camera. That's not natural, and we're all trying to do it, especially on these, on some of these online presentations. But don't expect yourself to be natural at it.
Well,
there's some absolute techniques that help you to, yes, feel more comfortable and come across as more natural, but it's not going to be natural.
I don't know if you've ever heard a great comedian being interviewed on a talk show who's not performing.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you ever heard Will Ferrell get interviewed when he's not playing a character. He's the most boring person on the planet.
Right. Well, exactly. And so what about Robert De Niro? Have you seen Robert De Niro?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, awful. And yet, when they're on screen, when they're in their performance, can't take your eyes off of them.
Yeah. Then you look at, like Chris Rock, who never turns it off, or
yeah.
Who's the other guy from 30 Rock? But who just
Alec Baldwin?
No. The guy who was in the car accident.
Oh yeah. Oh, Tracy
Morgan.
What's his name? Tracy Morgan. Yes.
Never
right.
turns it
They've
off.
just they are one with their character.
Right.
And that's great, but that's pretty rare. And it's not natural for most people to speak at a state where they're in a performance ready state. We don't just naturally know how to get there, and we don't know what that necessarily looks like for us. So there has to be some trial and error. There has to be some rehearsal in that process to find out what's your optimum state look like, and how do you get there? And do you have a process that can help you get there? Are you just winging it? Are you just hoping I hope I show up at my best for this next presentation because it's very important?
And how about as far as engaging people? Let's say somebody's a great conversationalist, but they're not a great monologue person, where they can go 5-10 minutes, but then they kind of need someone else to interact with them to really pull out the best of them.
You mean as far as a salesperson?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, I was like that. I was a great question guy, but you put me up in front and I can do maybe 20, 30 minutes, but it was, but I was so much more engaging when I could have a discussion.
Sure. Well, I agree with you. So I have an acting background, and I've also studied improv because improv is hard for me. I'm an actor. I like to have a script. I like to know what I'm going to say. I like to know what you're going to say. And I think most salespeople are like that. It's I want to know what they're going to say. Well, we don't know. There's this element of improvisation to it. But you can plan out as much as possible. And I can sort of script out for myself what, subtopics, and have a couple of talking points that I have I've practiced, and so I'm not just at a total loss when something comes up, and I can have questions set up at every section so that I don't, we don't end up just sitting there staring at each other well, now what? So there are prompts that you can give yourself to give yourself some comfort there, because everybody is different in that regard. You're right, as far as some people like that just improvisational part, and that's great. Yeah. But there's also a balance there. I find some salespeople that are so improvisational never get to the meat, never get to the point, never get to a close. So this idea of conversational presentations has really grown in the past year, and I think it's great because it really should feel like more of a conversation. But that doesn't mean that you don't have some areas where mini monologues or a paragraph that you're going to say that you've determined is the best way to present this particular topic.
And, oh yeah, because I've heard, I'm a podcast addict, and I can tell when there's the person who just does the monologue. The interview will ask her the question, and then there's 20 minutes of the person telling the story, and you're like, that's not the answer.
Wait,
and
what?
you're like, oh God. And I've certainly worked with salespeople who are like that, and that, in person, it's one thing. You might be able to read the other person's cues that, hey, they're not interested in where you went to elementary school. But online, people's putting their heads down playing with their smartphones, and you just lost them.
Right. You have to use good self-discipline, especially online, and really be succinct and test out that material. If you've got a story, and you brought up stories, which I think is a real interesting point, because stories can be very powerful, and there's a lot of talk about using stories in presentations and sales, and I think that's great. But most of the time, those stories they wander too much, especially if they're personal stories. Personal stories, which it can be especially powerful because they usually have an emotional element to it, and people connect to that. But when we tell personal stories, it's very hard because you're too close to it. It's like your own content, and so you haven't edited it well, and it comes out different every time, and you have to practice those stories. Those are like those mini monologues. So I would say, salespeople should have about 5 different stories in their back pocket to, one to address certain types of objections, one to talk about, a customer success story, maybe a personal story that focuses on the value of your product. But have those ready. That's a great place to spend some energy practicing those.
And how about like metaphors? Because I'm sure you deal with, new companies with new products in a new market space that, people automatically hear an acronym or a market segment and, the market leader pops in their mind and they say, we're covered. Right.
I think metaphors are great. And I think good metaphors are great. Right. Let me change that. There are, especially for a new product, a new solution, or something that's fairly complex, to say, this is like a Swiss Army knife. Basically, it's all your tools, in one place. What I see a lot of is people using the same metaphor, which again sort of waters down the impact of that. It's like the iPhone; everything's on it now. It's like, okay, can we get a little more creative than that?
Well, that's it. And I think too many companies commoditize themselves by trying to label themselves in an existing category. And all of a sudden people are like, well, I've got one of them. Well, it doesn't do what we do. Then don't call it the same thing.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, that can be just information that you've gotten from marketing that you're just taking to the streets, and it's not playing well. And you need to kind of go back to the table and say, hey, we need something that differentiates us more than this.
So you mentioned that you were thinking of writing another book. What part of your space do you think isn't documented well enough?
That's a good question. I like this idea of where we're going with our presentations and how we're adapting it to a more modern consumer who unfortunately doesn't have the attention span they used to. Yeah. But and that is that conversational style presentation where we're really thinking about how to communicate in shorter chunks. So I think that there's not enough exploration of how to do that in an engaging way that delivers value and still delivers the information that you need and still engages the person. Because what I'm finding is people are either cutting it so short that there's no connection with your audience. Like they're just getting to the point, and when shorter is like, okay, here's all the information. There you go. Okay, thanks. Bye. Right.
Yeah.
So there's some median ground. And I'm also finding this disturbing pattern that, it used to be people would, and I was guilty of this too, would read from their slides, right? Oh. Read all the bullet points to you. Now it seems like the tide has turned and salespeople are ignoring their slides. Like I sit in on, tons of presentations, and I'll have a slide in front of my face. The salesperson will put up a slide. It has something in 60-point Arial bold font, and they'll never mention it. And it's like, well, wait, is that important? Like, are we going to talk about this? What's happening? Or they'll put up a slide with, 7 bullet points on it, which you should never have 7 bullet points, but that's beside the point. And then they'll just kind of brush them aside. And it's like, well, then why are you showing me this? Yeah. So there's a disconnect between how we're using our presentation. I think many people have been so terrified by that. Oh, don't read from your slides. Don't read from your slides. Well, don't ignore them either, because they're so compelling, because they're in front of your customer's face. So get in sync with your slides and decide what you're going to call out on that slide. And, as a presenter, your job is to manage the eyes and ears of your audience. So if you want them to look at you, you can't have something competing on the screen.
Yeah. Excellent. This has been a fun conversation. Where do people go to get your book and learn more about your work?
You can go to my website at performancesalesandtraining.com or follow me on Twitter, Acting for Sales, acting in the number 4 sales, or connect on LinkedIn, Julie Hansen Sales Training.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. I love catching up with Julie. She always has some great insights and ideas of how we can become better presenters. And the key is really to connect with people, have the right energy, lead with your excitement, your enthusiasm, get to the problem very quickly. Because once you get the problem discussed, you're talking about why they're really going to buy versus the what you do and how you do it. Speaking of which, I've got a new course coming up. January 1st, I think, is going to be the release date. It's going to be Questions That Sell. And what I'm going to do is go through my questioning technique that I've developed over 25 years and break it down for you. And I'm going to offer the ability to help you design yours. Make sure you take a first cut at it, but then sit down with you at least probably twice. Once to see where you are, give you some ideas, and then to polish them up maybe in a couple weeks after that. So look for that course around the January time frame. I'm going to start talking about it a little bit more. But it's been kind of the missing piece in the course structure, really allowing people to have conversations that focus around the problem that you solve versus the what you do and how you do it without being interrogating, and to understand the structure of a sales conversation and what are the main elements, and so that you can leave with those handful of questions that you can just easily memorize and go into each call prepared to really crush it. So look for that and start the conversation. Get the meeting is just blowing up. Everyone who's taking it is getting enormous results. I'm offering one-on-ones with people. That's just me and you talking through your particular deal. It gets shared in the course, and you can either pay a monthly fee for the course or pay all at once. Make it smell like gas, you know? Why should you pay for it? The manager will never know. For less than the price of a coffee a day, you're going to get your number blown away. So think about it. Going into next year with a pipeline that just crushes, a full funnel, instead of everybody else waking up January 1st, oh, what am I going to do? Or maybe closing the deals. The deals are getting stuck. You just don't know where they are. You don't know what to do next. You're overwhelmed with options and ideas and next steps, but you don't have a clear course. You're literally going breadcrumb to breadcrumb instead of having a map, a treasure map, instead of a treasure hunt. So make sure you're checking out that course at b2brevenue.com, and make sure you're checking out Gong.io's blog. Chris Orlov there is doing a great job. I did an interview with one of their reps a couple weeks ago. Check out that. And the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Are you a listener? Are you subscribing? How about sales questions? You got questions? I got answers. I got my answers. I don't know if they're the answers, but check that podcast out as well. The Sales Questions Podcast. And make sure you're connecting up with me on LinkedIn and show a little thumbs up, a little appreciation for all my hard work. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. And I really would appreciate everybody who goes onto LinkedIn, connects up with me or follows me there. If you happen to see some of my content flying by, if you could throw a little thumbs up or a comment or a share, I definitely appreciate it. It helps spread the word about the podcast. And make sure you're checking out my website, b2brevenue.com. You can get my free book on how companies make product selections. It's a real book. It is on Amazon, but I give it away for free. Just register there. It'll email you a link to it, and you can just download the PDF from there. Also, if you want to check out the courses, start the conversation, get the meeting, or closing the complex sale, and you have more questions about it, the short answer is there are video courses. You get access for a year, but it's also a community. What does that mean? You can ask questions anytime via voicemail or email. I answer them within a week, put them into the course. We have office hours every other week. It's an hour long course where you can I pick a topic, answer questions, you can ask questions. Also, you can schedule one-on-ones for free, and we just talk through your particular use case, and that gets shared with the course. So if you don't have time for office hours or the timing doesn't work, or you just want some more one-on-one help, that's all included for a whole year. So it's really a year to go from where you are to where you want to be. And so it's not just videos. It's not just knowledge. It's practice. It's getting feedback. You can send me emails. You can send me your presentation. I'll help you with anything that you need to close the complex sale or get the meeting. And you can check out them at b2brevenue.com. So that's it. I really appreciate it. And please tell somebody about the podcast and let me know if I can help you in any way. Oh, and you want to hear some results from the course? Well, here you go.
You know, I love the approach. It's working for me just fantastic. If I sent you some of the emails, which I should, the conversations that I'm having with people, I think you'd be blown away because they're not really about work. Yeah. I've figured out if you can kind of get personal with them, like one lady, it's all about her family, kids. And then I sprinkled in a little bit around work, and she's LinkedIn, sending me messages on LinkedIn, photos of her family. No, I'm not even kidding. I should show this to you. You'd be stunned. I was shocked. And we're going to lunch on September 6th. And yesterday she shot me a LinkedIn message and said, "Hey, Ron, why don't we get on the phone and do a video call beforehand so our lunch isn't so awkward? We're like barely not meeting each other for the first time." Oh, holy cow, right? Like, this is unbelievable. So this is not the first time that this has happened. She's kind of an extreme, but I'm starting to figure out a pattern where I can actually make this a process, you know? So
good. Yeah.
I'll show you that. So it's getting to that point. And every time I do this, I'm like, God, this is unbelievable, you know? So.
And it feels better too, doesn't it?
Oh, Brian, let me tell you something. To be able to go to lunch with her, I'll even talk to her on the phone, right? We're going to talk about family, kids, work-life harmony, because I shared a thing with her from Bezos about work-life harmony. This is where the conversation will start. Now, at some point, we're both not stupid, right? We know we're going to talk about work. We know why we're both there. Right. But to kick it off this way is so much better. And to end that lunch with the last 5 to 8 minutes of telling, well, what are you guys doing with digital